This webinar is being recorded. Hello and welcome everyone to our fourth of 4 Rest and Sprint Try training webinars with Sharon Adams, owner of Rising Sun Fitness. Take it away, Sharon.
Hi, thanks for being here. Today we're going to talk about the run segment of the Rest and Sprint Triathlon. So we've had the introductory webinar, and then we had the swim and the bike with the transition. So we'll start off with some of the run information. I might kind of blend some of this first slide about the run course in with the T2, the transition from the bike to run, but we'll start off here with just a little bit of quick review with the run course. The run is a 5K. The run is done on trails. There are parts where you have to cross over roads and you finish coming up a road, but really the bulk of the run course is on trails. These are paved trails, Reston Association trails, so they're really nice. They're beautiful trails. And we'll go over the course, but one of my recommendations to keep in mind is whenever you're running on trails, and you can kind of, especially if you live in Reston or if you live in a place where there are community trails, and I could talk about this also a little bit in the training section, but it is good to once in a while get in the mindset of, maybe doing one of your tempo run workouts on trails. Trails are really easy to kind of get a little bit lazy on. They're windy, you can't always see a whole lot of people in front of you. It's not like the road where it's just straight go, you can see who's in front of you, you can see where you're going. It's kind of easy on trails to get a little bit soft and a little bit, slowing down just by the nature of being on a trail. And again, it's a paved trail, so it's not like you're going slower because of the surface area. It's just the nature that you're on of being in a more enclosed environment. So kind of keep that in mind and take that into your training. But we'll start with the actual course. So on this, actually, if we can go back to the slide again. So if we are starting the run by the blue rectangle at the bottom is the swimming pool. So you start the course, you go a little bit behind the pool on trails. So very quickly you are kind of out of the way of spectators. They'll have a chance, if you do have spectators, family, friends that are coming to watch, there will be chances that they can be at different points on this course. But right away, it doesn't take you through the main area. So it pushes you off away from the bike area, which is really nice. And then it really is all on trails. There's great volunteer support along the way. So you have, even though this course is lots of twists and turns, as you can see by this, you have no worries. You do not have to think twice about worrying about, making the wrong turn, not knowing where you're going. It's marked, there's volunteers. You will have that support on the course. So there is no worries at all. You're always staying on the right-hand side, just like you do for the bike. So you're staying right if you need to pass somebody, because it is a trail. You're not on the road. So there is that idea of space if you're running next to somebody, and then people are coming from the other side, the trails can get crowded. So keep that in mind. Stay to the right unless you're passing somebody. But for the most part, the course is your 5K course. It is rolling hills. So it is not a flat course. So prepare on hills, and we'll go through that a little bit more. Okay, so let's move to the next slide, get a little bit more into the run. Okay, so just starting out very generally, running is the segment of a triathlon where if you're new to triathlon, a lot of times running is the segment that will sometimes kind of cause an injury. And I just wrote a couple things here as an idea of things to kind of really just have as your baseline of taking care of, increasing your mileage carefully. There is a 10% rule. Most people have heard of this. If you're new to running, keep in mind you don't want to, it is a very general rule. It's not, something that you can't stray from. However, as a general rule, you don't want to increase your miles per week by more than 10%. So if you were running 10 miles a week right now, you wouldn't next week, if you were trying to increase the amount of miles, next week you'd go to 11 miles. You would only increase it by 1 mile per week. That being said, if you are a runner who is running a whole lot and doing this sprint triathlon as a real test of speed and racing and you're doing 50 miles a week, you could add in 5 miles a week to add in some more distance. So the 10% rule is for your total overall mileage per week, to help in avoiding injury, but also the 10% rule can also be similar going over to whatever your longest run is per week. So if the longest that you run right now is 4 miles, then as a typical increase, you wouldn't want to go past like 4.4 or up to like 4.5 miles. So then you're increasing it a little bit more gradually. So kind of keep that in mind and give yourself time to progress. So be patient with running. It's not something to go from 0 to 60 so quickly. Second thing down for avoiding injuries is the shoes. And that is just the very first thing. If you do not have specific running shoes right now, you do need to go right now and get running shoes. You need shoes that are just running shoes. They are not your walking into the grocery store shoes. You don't mow the grass in those shoes. You don't just wear them around throughout your day in those shoes. They are your running shoes. You could use them if you wanted to for doing strength training and cross training as well. But I really suggest people just use them for running, keep a running log, and that's also for avoiding injuries as well as for training progression and also just simple motivation to keep a training log. But that way you can record and know how many miles you have on your running shoes at any time. For running shoes, there is a super, super general mileage rule. You'll hear anywhere from like 200 to 400. I wrote 300 miles because sometimes that will be like the one number that's cited. But that has such a variation within people. If you're a heavier runner, if you run heavy on your feet, if you have a tendency to kind of push down on your feet a little bit more, if you're newer to running, then you would want to switch your shoes earlier than that. As well as you will get a sense, if you've been running for a while, you kind of have a sense of, you go for a run just randomly one time and you realize, these shoes, they're not feeling like they used to. So you really do have that sense of, kind of that mental connection to your feet, to what is not serving you well, and that you need to go out and get new shoes. A lot of times in the transition to new shoes, I recommend that people still wear their old shoes maybe for every other run over the course of a week or over the course of 2 weeks, just to kind of go gradually into the new shoe. So talking about shoes really quick, there are such things, you can use regular running shoes. There are such running shoes as triathlon run shoes. And that is just, you don't need specific triathlon running shoes. So if you have running shoes that are running shoes, you can use those for this race. If you do want to get a specific triathlon run shoe, I listed some, you can Google them. Basically, if it's a triathlon running shoe, there's just a few different features of them. One being that they're usually made with easy entry laces, meaning that you don't have to sit down, put a shoe on, and sit there tying the shoelaces of each foot. They are just cinching them tight and going. The other thing is that they allow more than running shoes. They usually allow for more water drainage. Not because you're wearing them, obviously, in the pool. It's just that your body has been wet. You are going to be pouring water over your head for hot summer races. And so rather than carrying an extra pound of water within your shoes as they're kind of like squeaking through the run, these shoes are made with a little bit more water drainage. So general injury prevention for warming up. Just a couple quick things, and this is just very basic, but it's basic, but it's stuff we end up forgetting as we get more used into our running. So if you've been running for 20, 30 years, this might be the stuff that now is a good time for a reminder, because we've gotten sometimes away from remembering how important our warm-up is. Warm up gradually. Don't push. Your warm-up has nothing to do with the speed of the rest of the run. Unless you go too fast, it will limit the speed of the rest of your run. So I always tell people, the warm up, the first, whatever is your length of your warm up, it should feel so patient and gradual. So give yourself that time, walk a minute or two, get into a super slow jog, progress every 2 minutes. So really have that very gradual warm up. The second thing for general injury prevention is to have a varied purpose for all of your runs. As I've said for all of these webinars, every time you go to do a workout, at the very beginning of your workout, when you're lacing up, when you're driving to the swim, when you're getting on your bike, you should know, what is the purpose of my next hour, then my next 30 minutes, my next 2 hours? What's the purpose? What am I working on? What am I going to know that I have accomplished by this workout? If you're always working at the same intensity, the same terrain, that is going to be a little bit more of a likelihood for you to run into a problem of getting an injury, having just something where you're feeling a knee, feeling an ankle or a foot. And the other thing for injury prevention is running form. We take so many footsteps per minute. It's usually between 180 and 200 footsteps per minute. If you're doing something at a weird angle, each of your footsteps for however long you're running, that's just repetitive, bugging your joints. So form is important. I'm going to go over form a little bit more in the webinar, but keep in mind, we feel sometimes like running is just so basic. Put your shoes on and go. However, you do want to be at least aware of your form and have that as kind of a mental connection that you can use, you know, to really stay present within your runs, to stay present, to make it meaningful, and to feel where your feet are, to notice where your shoulders are, to notice that your core is in the right way. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Rules for the run section of, so the USA Triathlon rules for the run section of a triathlon. Not a whole lot, but there are a few. Number one, have your race number visible, okay? So you're going to have a race belt, and I have later in the webinar where you can get these from. A race belt, if you are not familiar, is just a piece of elastic that goes around. You can flip it around. It can be as simple as that, and you just safety pin your race number that you will be given at packet pickup to this. So you'll get the race number the day before the race, and you just use safety pins, which you will also get at packet pickup, to put your race number on your race belt. That way, you will have your race number at your transition area on a belt. You don't have to stand in transition with a safety pin while your heart rate's up and try to safety pin something to your swimsuit. You can just put your race belt on, and as you're actually putting it on, you're already starting to run through transition to go onto the run course. So you need to have your race number always visible. There is a rule, USA Triathlon, no music, no headphones, no earpods. So that is a rule. It is for safety, it is for your safety and for others. I know tons of people love to run with music, and I am just here to remind you that it is a rule to not have music while you're on the run part. The third rule here is don't litter. That is, if there's a race official that sees you littering, you will get a penalty. The penalty is what they call abandoning your race equipment. So if you got a water, like a water bottle in your race belt, or if you had a gel packet in your race that you were carrying and you drink your gel and you throw that down, that it would be a penalty. So you don't litter on the race course. Carry your stuff. In triathlons, if you have stuff and you don't want to carry it in your hands, you tuck it right into your swimsuit. It's like the weirdest thing. You're running in your swimsuit, you're carrying food in your swimsuit, anything, but it's what it is. It's triathlon. So don't be afraid to put some food in your swimsuit. So let's move on to the next section. Or actually, for the food thing, for carrying it, if you are wanting to, if you have bike shorts on, a lot of people will tuck those into the leg of their bike shorts as well. So that's just another idea. And you'll get used to, with training, you'll get used to what works, because you're not just racing with fuel. You need to train with it to make sure it works for your body. Run training. So this is the side that we're on currently. Run training. What I really recommend is running 3 times per week minimum. In the previous webinars, I have said for swim, I really recommend 2 times a week at a minimum, especially if you are a new swimmer. Same thing with bike. I said about the bike, really try to aim for 2 times a week. For running, I say 3 times a week, because even if you are just, I put 3 in there, even if you're just getting out for a mile run at the end of a bike workout, or even at the end of a swim, just go out, run 5 minutes out, run 5 minutes back, and that way you get another time in on your feet. Use a run as a warm up to a strength training session. The main thing is that the more you're running, the more miles that you get in, and this is along with safety, however, to keep in mind, you're not trying to run every day. So you do want to be aware. However, the more miles you're getting used to, the more efficient your body becomes with running, at running, the more comfortable you feel while you're running, the easier it feels. So the least amount that you're running, the harder running is. if you are just beginning to train, if you're not a typical runner and you're just getting into it, thinking, okay, my goal is to get through the run. My recommendation is while you're building up your run, don't run 2 days in a row. So if you are a new runner, have it be an every other day type thing. And the second bullet point down that I wrote was just to even add in 1 mile on off days if you can. When you're on that build up, it's a great way just to get in that next mile, just to build up a little bit of mileage. That doesn't mean always adding in what's called junk miles. But if you're running with good form, if you're not overly stressing your body with fatigue in your legs, then getting in those extra miles will really make you a little bit more efficient on your feet. You'll have a better feel for where your feet are supposed to be landing. And the more efficient you are, the less likely you will to be injured. Again, as long as that running is done with good form. Listen to your body within. If you're knowing that you're just feeling so heavy legs, you're so fatigued in your muscles, that's your indication. Your body is speaking to you saying it needs a day off, or it needs a day of active recovery with maybe swimming or taking a walk, or doing yoga to stretch out some of those tighter muscles, doing some core work. Intervals. So for run training, this is huge. Not only is this going to make you a better runner, it makes it fun. So you're not always just going out for a distance. You're not always just going out for a time to try to keep running for. You're combining intervals of hard intensity with intervals of recovery. And these can vary so much. Definitely have it every week, have one of your workouts being an interval workout. And for new runners, that might mean starting off by running for 2 minutes, walking for 1 minute, run for 2 minutes, walk for a minute. For runners who've been training forever, that might be going out, doing a 1 to 2 mile warm up and doing 4 3/4 of a mile going hard with a 1/4 mile jog. It might be doing it still might be a 1 minute walk and a 2 minute super hard run. So your intervals of activity and hard work you can vary those so much. You can do long intervals of hard work with short intervals of recovery, or if you're doing shorter and more intense intervals, then you might need a little bit longer so that your next interval is able to be successful with what your goal is for that interval. So always really remember the purpose. What is the purpose of my interval? Am I trying to get my body used to going at a speed that I know for sure I can't maintain, but getting those higher levels high? Or is my purpose doing a 10-minute interval to get my body used to continuing a high level of work without needing a recovery every 3 minutes? So always kind of know what you're aiming for, and that kind of speaks right into the mental aspect of your training session, so that you can kind of connect to that and remind yourself while you're in the middle of your hard work how this will apply to race day, why it's important that you actually finish out the workout. Long runs. This is another element of your weekly run training. Long runs, just like intervals, I definitely recommend doing a longer run every week. If you're new to running, your long runs might be building you up to be able to run a 5K. If you have been doing triathlons, if you are already into your running cycle, then your long runs you might be training for something longer. You might be training for a half marathon at the same time. So your long runs won't be building to 3 miles. Your long runs will be longer, but they're still for your bodies all working the same energy system. It's working your aerobic energy system. And you want that so that you're combining that with the other workouts during the week that are more interval based, that are more steady state, and whatever the purpose of your training plan is for those workouts. So it makes it fun. No run during the week should ever be the same at all. You shouldn't have to go out and just go out with no plan in your mind. There's always a plan, which kind of makes it fun because you're there to achieve a goal on that day, and you can finish and be successful with that goal. So let's move on to the next slide for some more run training. Brick training. This is your other time during the week, especially as you get more and more into your training. It's beginning of February right now. So if you want to start right now doing a brick workout, that's great. I would definitely say at mid-April, definitely start getting 1 brick in per week. A brick is, and we started on this in the last webinar a little bit, but just as a little bit of a review, a brick is any time that you brick 2 workouts together. So you put 2 bricks together. Your bricks might be a bike workout, and a run workout. That's a bike run brick. Your brick might be a swim run. So you do a swim, immediately go into your run. So you make them fun. You want to do a minimum of 1 brick per week, especially once you're really getting into your training. All the combinations of bricks are helpful. Similar, this is just like what I was talking about with intervals. There's such a variety. That's one of the great things about triathlons. There's such a variety. Your training you'll never be bored. If you're ever bored training for a triathlon, email me, because I can guarantee that you won't be. There's so much potential variety in your training program. Bricks can be long bike bricks and with a short run afterwards. That you can have a middle distance bike with intervals into a middle distance run with intervals. So you can see, just kind of thinking about those, how each of these different things will apply specifically to race day. You might have a really short, hard bike workout. You might be in the winter on your trainer saying, I'm going to do 20 minutes on my bike, where I do a 10-minute warm up and I go as hard as I can for 10 minutes. But then I'm going to do a long run after that, where my run is more aerobic and I just try to keep going as long as I can. And again, this webinar for general population, it could be your long run might be building up to 3 miles. Your long run might be building up to 10 miles. Whatever your purpose of your training is, let that serve you. You can do race distance bricks for a confidence level as well. I recommend this for sure. If this is your first triathlon, you're gonna be building to the level where you can go out and you can do a 12-mile bike into a 3-mile run. So you might plan a race distance brick 2.5 weeks before the actual race. That is something that's great to do. It's not that you absolutely need to do it, but if you're wanting to build that confidence, I highly recommend it. Run bike run bricks you can do. You can bring your bike and your trainer to the track and do a track brick workout. There's so much variety that's out there. It makes it so fun. And another thing with brick training is it's a huge surprise to your muscles. You can brick your workouts as well with strength into run workouts. So you can do a leg strength workout into a run, very similar to what you're going to feel doing a bike run brick. The last bullet on this slide is not a bad idea at all to try to run a little bit after any of the other workouts if you do have the time. So even if you feel like you have 5 minutes, if you finish up a strength workout, hop on the treadmill. If there's a treadmill right there, wherever you're doing strength, hop on, just do an easy jog or do a couple bursts of hills. So it will serve you well. Any extra time that you spend running at the end of a workout for a brick you will feel that difference come race day, because the transition from biking to running is the hardest part of the triathlon usually. So let's move on to the next slide. Winter run training, a lot of times we run on treadmills. Some people love treadmills, a lot of people hate treadmills. I love using a treadmill my own self because it holds you accountable. It holds you honest. Some of the best actual training can be done on a treadmill. It's just kind of overcoming that mental, what you might call drudgery of being in an environment that's not changing. So that's what I always say. If you're running on the treadmill, have a plan, just like any other workout, but have it be a playful run where it might be really hard. It might be intervals. It might be really testing your limits. But know what your goal is. And that way you have many goals throughout the run. You're not just trying to stay on a treadmill for 5 miles at whatever speed feels happy for that day. You have a plan that you're going to do half-mile repeats at, this is your goal because this is what you did them on 3 weeks ago. And you want to see if you can maybe add an extra interval in. So make it fun. On a treadmill, I recommend, for the most part, in general, using 1% on a treadmill to mimic a flat road terrain. The reason for that, and is that if you want to go on a treadmill and kind of feel this out, you can for yourself. The reason is on a treadmill, you can, if it's at 0%, basically the way you're running, you can kind of run just by pushing yourself up so that the belt goes under you, instead of using the same musculature that you would if your treadmill is set at 1%. So you will be more closely training for an actual run on roads if you're training at 1%. If you have an injury, if your knee is bothering you, if your hamstring is giving you, hamstring or glute is bothering you, or if your calves are bothering you, then I don't always necessarily recommend 1%. That might be a time where you do a 0% treadmill run. The other thing along with this, and I didn't put it right after this for the bullet point, but hills should definitely be incorporated on treadmill runs. So within every week, if you're doing one run for sure on the treadmill, some weeks that might be your hill workout. Or if it's not an actual designed hill workout, at least add in a hill or two during the time that you're running. During the winter, when you're running outdoors, if there is any risk, especially in the morning when you can't see, when there's risk of black ice or slipping, I always recommend trying to take that day indoors versus taking the chance to slip. Or even if you don't slip and fall, a lot of times foot muscles, heels, you'll start to feel, if you have previously had plantar fasciitis, you will feel that because your feet, the small postural foot muscles in your feet are gripping and really just always constantly turned on in a way they don't need to always be if there's no risk of ice and no risk of slipping. Running in the dark, be careful of wet leaves, be careful of acorns on the ground, things that you might be missing. So there's just so many extra dark hours during the day. So that's why I highly recommend just at least knowing where a treadmill is available for you to use in the event of like unsafe outdoor weather conditions. If you are running outside during the cold weather, that's great. Some people don't mind bundling up. You know, even sometimes even going in snow is a little bit easier than going when it's at that borderline of ice and black ice. So if you are somebody who likes to go out in the very cold weather, give yourself extra time to warm up. If it's your interval day, change it, because you don't need to be doing intervals in the coldest outdoor weather. That is a recipe for injury. Your pace will be slower if you're running outside in the cold. Do your intense work on the treadmill or once your body is definitely thoroughly warmed up. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So running form, I mean, any of these slides, just like throughout all of these series of webinars, I mean, I could spend a whole afternoon, and I love doing this and working with people on this, but running form is so important to help you. A lot of times, you know, we all, including myself, think to myself, okay, it's running, put your shoes on and go. And that is what you do. And that's one of the nice things about it. However, there is a form that you want to, you don't need to change your whole running style depending on how you're running, but you want to at least be aware. So you're guiding your body and having that connection to your awareness of getting your body to be in the most efficient way possible. The ideal running form is what's known as a midfoot landing. This takes some time to really understand and get a feel for. Midfoot landing basically means that you are not landing on your heel, but you're also not running on the balls of your foot. So when you land doing a midfoot land, your heel might touch the floor, but there's really no pressure on your heel. You're already effectively off and past the heel. The reason for that is if your heel lands first, then you are braking your body, and every time that braking creates jarring action that goes through your hips, through your spine, through even up to your cervical spine. So it's hard on your body, and basically you're braking yourself and having to regain your momentum every single step you take. You will be so much slower. You'll be on your feet more, and any time that is spent when you're running that your foot is on the ground, if your foot is on the ground, your body's not going forward. So you're not in the phase of actual running if your foot's on the ground. So you want to be midfoot so you can get your foot off the ground as soon as possible. Moving along, even though I feel like I would love to spend so much more time on that midfoot thing because there's drills that you can do, but keep that in mind. Ooh, so we're gonna go back to the run form, but just moving on to the next bullet. Relaxing your shoulders and neck, especially off the bike. So for triathletes, this is way important. You're going to get off of the bike. Your hands have been on the brakes. You've been tight maybe through your shoulders, hopefully not too tight, but it's a change of posture. So you will be needing to consciously remind yourself, move your chin left to right. If your chin can freely move left to right, that means your neck is fluid and it's not tight. You'll feel the difference if you're tight and holding tension. If you're trying to move, if you just take a couple times to shift your shin left to right and say almost like a no movement with your head. So keep relaxed as much as you can. Also, keeping relaxed through the shoulders and neck opens up your lungs. Your heart is, everything is a little bit more open to be efficient and to give you the oxygen that you need to feed your muscles with. Moving through the running form, hip, knee, toe alignment. If you're running at a treadmill, one of the best things you can do while you're on a treadmill is if it can be set up for a little bit and you can watch right in front of you your form. You'll notice if your knee is kind of pointing in, pointing out, if your heel kind of sweeps out to the side afterwards. You want to imagine that there's almost little flashlights on your knees, and your knee, the flashlights are pointing straight forward. If you can ever video your run, that's another great tool to use, especially in the winter time. While we think of running on the treadmill is so boring, there's all these drills you can do on the treadmill. You can video your run to kind of get an idea of where places are that you can spend 4 minutes of your run focusing just on form, thinking about landing midfoot, thinking about your shoulders, thinking about your arms not crossing over the center line of your body. So video is a great tool to use. And I just said about the arms at the very last bullet is arms, keeping them relaxed, keeping your palms, your fingers relaxed. They should not cross the midline of your body ideally. If they are crossing, that means there's moving left to right. Your body's not trying to move left and right. So any left to right movement of your arms crossing over is going to have implications for your hips and your spine. So you really want to have everything moving in your plane of movement. Moving to the next slide. So strength for running. And I do love, love, love this picture that's on here because this is a core move that I do in a lot of my classes that I teach. That move right there, if you want to, keep it in mind to highlight it and do it this week at the end of all of your workouts. So that's core for shoulders, that's core for hips, that's abs, that's low back. So I do love it. But strength training for running. Couple quick bullet points. Start with hip strength and hip stability, which yes, is the picture that you see right there. That's one of the exercises you can do. Other hip strength and hip stability exercises are using ankle bands, doing single leg work. So single leg calf work, single leg squats, any type of glute activation that you can do. And this could be a simple spinal balance exercise on going to hands and knees, doing some cat and cows, and then doing one arm forward, the opposite leg backward. That's glute activation. That's a great one to do before a run, but as well, that's great to do at any time. That's great to do as almost a recovery during some of your hard strength workouts. If your heart rate is up a whole lot, go down hands to knees, do spinal balance, get some core work in while you're recovering your muscles. Planks, adding in low back strength, shoulder endurance is surprisingly helpful, and you'll feel that as you increase your training and running, as you increase your intensity, that sometimes you might feel it in your low back and your shoulders even feeling a little bit of fatigue. Something to add into strength training for running is also any lateral movement. Any strength session that you do as a triathlete, as a runner, should involve lateral movement because we don't do anything laterally as triathletes. We don't swim sideways, we don't bike sideways, everything's forward. So any strength workout you do, there should be some shuffles in it. There should be some side lunges, inner thigh work, outer hip work, obliques. So getting in the different planes of movement. One thing also strength training can really help is to just be aware and to notice, oh my goodness, when I do single leg work, this hamstring is so much weaker than the other. That's not a reason to overly work that hamstring to try to catch up. But if you're seeing imbalances in your strength, it's common to have imbalances. But if they're definitely noticeable, if your balance on one side is a lot stronger than the other, make note of that and work on it. It'll be the best thing that you can do for injury prevention. So moving on to the next slide. So for running, is injury prevention. First bullet point, it seems so basic, but so many people don't do this. Keep track of what you're doing, your exercise log. I don't care if you write it on a piece of paper, if you have a spiral notebook, if you keep it on your computer, if you put it on your phone, if you do training peaks online. In the long run, you really, really want to know what you've done. So not only is that a great tool to go back if your back starts bothering you, or a shoulder, you can look at what did I do last week? What might have been too much? But also the day before the race, the athletes that I coach, I always say the day before a race, go back and look at your last 4 months of training. You've done everything you've needed to do. You're ready. So for confidence, it's huge. But also it keeps you true. At the end of the week, you can add up how many times did I swim? How many times did I bike? How many times did I run? What am I missing out on? What am I maybe increasing too much my tendency? What am I doing too much of at the sacrifice of really not getting to the pool or something like that? For injury prevention, and I went through this a little bit before, but just knowing the purpose, knowing that you're adding in hill workouts, you're adding in intervals, but you're not needing to do that every day. You should not be doing an interval workout every day of the week, even if those workouts are a swim interval workout, a bike interval workout, a run interval workout. Your body will break down if you go hard day after day after day. The strength stuff that I had on the previous slide, if you're adding in strength, at least a full body 2 times a week, and it doesn't need to be an hour each time. You can be super efficient with strength training. Your yoga class, depending on what type of yoga class you're doing, could count as your strength training. The yoga classes that I teach are fully strength workouts. Legs, core, hips, upper body, depending on the type of class you're taking, that can definitely be a strength session. And even if it's not, it definitely can be a tool for easing out the muscles, for letting them actively and healthily recover. For injury prevention, cross training. So as a means of what we do as triathletes, we are cross training, swim, bike, run. So already that is very helpful. And also eating as a triathlete, taking care of your nutrition as you are an athlete is helpful. So really paying attention to fueling our body for recovery, fueling our body healthily for our workouts, not cutting out too many things. We're athletes. We need to fuel. If you're sitting at a desk all day and you're not working out, those people might need to cut carbs a lot more than we need to cut out carbs. We need carbohydrates. They are fuel. So really being aware of if you're actually maybe limiting too much and getting enough vitamins, minerals, if you're making sure that you're not ever limiting fruits and vegetables. There is never a nutrition plan that I can agree with that limits those categories of food at all. So let's move on to the next slide. We're getting right through this. Keep in mind, I just wanted to also put as like a throughout here for contact me if you have any questions that for swimming, biking, and running that you have as you're training, if you have those questions tonight, or if you want to try out some of my training that you think, oh, now that I'm hearing this about strength training, about yoga, about coaching, reach out to me. It makes it fun to have groups that you train with. I'm going to be doing a beginning triathlon clinic in the next month coming up. So if you're interested, please reach out to me. And the next slide that we have coming up, we can move right to this. And these are our final things. So I already talked about the race belt. That's what you put your running number on. If you don't have that, go ahead, order that tonight. You can get those from Amazon. You can get it from a company called Trisports. Email me if you want. Other places, local running stores carry those. If you go to like a Dick's Sporting Goods store, they won't have some of this stuff. But if you go to a triathlon or a run specialized store, they will. Same thing with triathlon shoelaces. You can get those from any of these places that I listed above. Just another thing, keep in mind, things that you might not even think of until race week. Oh my goodness, what am I gonna do about socks? Do I run with socks? Some people run with socks. They will stop after the swim and they'll put socks on for the whole rest of their triathlon. Some people don't ever put socks on in a triathlon. They swim obviously without socks. They put their bare feet into their bike shoes and then they put their bare feet into their run shoes. I do that. I never wear socks, but I also make sure the month or 6 weeks before my first races of the season, I begin preparing myself, sometimes even 8 weeks, I will be preparing myself with at least one workout a week where I'm running in my triathlon shoes, my triathlon run shoes without socks. So make sure you're aware, what do I want to do? And here's the other thing, what to wear. It seems like something that we always forget, and then it becomes one of the most basic things that you have these questions with. There's so much variety. There's so much variety of what you have available to you. We're obviously now at this time where you can Google anything, you'll find a bunch of stuff. But what I really do also urge you to do is wear what you're most comfortable in. You don't have to wear what everybody else is wearing. If you're comfortable just wearing your swimsuit, if you're comfortable in your swimsuit and just hopping on a pair of bike shorts on top of that, or whatever it is, find what you're comfortable in. And if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out, because people always, you're not weird for wondering that. If you have a question about that, that is a very common question. And the final thing, and I already touched on this, but training log, count back the weeks. This is, one of the things I'm big on, is that always knowing how many weeks do I have until my race, because it sneaks up each week. Each month goes by very quickly. Each week goes by very quickly. From this coming weekend, so in 4 more days, the weekend that we have coming up right now, you are 16 weeks out from race day. So keep that in mind. Each 4 of those weeks goes by super quick. So every 4 of those weeks, kind of think in your mind about, okay, this is the next month of training. What do I want to have achieved within the next 4 weeks? Because it goes fast. But it goes fast, but you can make every day successful. Every week can be completing your successful training. And that's part of why we do what we do, because we have these goals, and then, we make a plan of attack and we go after it. And it's not always going to go, our training will always go, dream-like and fantasy-like. But we do what we can, we do our best, and then we make adjustments. Within those 16 weeks, everybody that's doing this race within the next 16 weeks will have a week that stuff came up that didn't go as they wanted it to. So you're not out of the norm. That will happen to me. That will happen to every single person. So you adjust, you adapt. That way you keep your log. You know what you need to get in. You know what you missed. You'll make up for it. Travel might come up. Sickness might happen. Family stuff. So you adapt and you adjust, but you keep track of your weeks. Okay, that is where, the goals of this week didn't happen. So how can I, blend that into the next week and carry on? So, and the next slide, I think it's just the very final conclusion of our webinar. So thanks for joining. Thanks for listening. If you do have questions, please reach out. Let me know any questions that you have. Congratulations for signing up for the race. Congratulations for being in your training. It's exciting. It's fun. Have a blast.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sharon. It's been such a great webinar series, these 4 webinars on the training for Rest and Sprint Triathlon. Everyone, please watch your inboxes. You'll receive an email with links to all the replays that are posted on YouTube and copies of the decks also. I hope to see everybody. You should have gotten an invitation to the first meetup. That's going to be next Monday night at Calypso's Sports Tavern, and that is from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.